And is that not a huge amount of competition for the accommodation? Well, yes it is, and no it isn't. In this video, I'm going to explain why. People have been walking the Camino for centuries, and as such, an infrastructure has built up along the main routes to support pilgrims as well as the local economy. So there are many places to stay along the way. But what are the accommodation options? Do I book ahead or not? Should I book with a travel company, or should I use a bag transfer company? I'm going to go through each of these questions in turn, but do hang around until the end of the video as I will share a few of my personal favourite places that I stayed along the Camino Frances. Accommodation options. Firstly, let's discuss albergues or pilgrim hostels. To stay in an albergue, you will need a pilgrim passport and a sleeping bag or sleeping bag liner. Albergues are budget accommodations specifically for pilgrims, and as such, they're usually more basic but provide exactly what a pilgrim needs at the end of a day's walking. A bed, a shower, somewhere to wash clothes, and either a kitchen to cook, or they more commonly will serve a pilgrim meal. There are different types of albergues: municipal, donativo, donation-based, and private. Municipal albergues are public albergues owned by the local municipality or council, and you cannot book them in advance. They are often simple but have what you need. Donativo albergues rely on pilgrims' donations to keep them running. They're often, but not always, run by a parochial or church organisation. Typically, the beds will be dorms with bunk beds, but they can be extremely basic as well, such as a mat on a church floor, like this one that I stayed in at Gragnon. However, parochial albergues in particular will often have volunteers who do their best to be available for their guests and meet not just the immediate physical needs of the guests by providing a meal and a place to shower. They may also offer support for spiritual needs of the pilgrim guests, such as providing an optional service or circle time with their guests. As I say, that will always be optional. Private albergues, again, will usually have bunk beds in dorms, and some private albergues will also have private rooms with a made-up bed and a towel. I've stayed in some private albergues that had additional luxuries available to all their pilgrim guests, such as a swimming pool or special communal dinners with amazing food. Private albergues will vary in quality and the services they provide, and they are, of course, run as a business. Another type of accommodation commonly found along the Camino are hostels, pensions, and casa rurals. A hostel or pension usually have private rooms, and you won't need your own sleeping bag or towel, but they don't always have a restaurant, laundry facilities, or kitchen for guests to use, so do bear that in mind. A casa rural also has private rooms. They're more like a bed and breakfast, and you will see more of these in Galicia, and they often do evening meals as well. Some hostels will even have an albergue attached to them. To be honest though, the lines of definition that divide these different types of accommodation can be blurry, and they're not always really distinct categories. Hotels. These probably don't need any explanation. You will of course have your own private room and bathroom, and there will be a bar and restaurant attached. There won't be any communal dinners though, and it might be more difficult to meet other pilgrims unless you're mingling together in communal areas within the hotel, so different to an albergue. And there are of course different standards of hotels with different price tags attached to them. The most luxurious in Spain tend to be paradors. These are often in beautiful old buildings, like this one in Leon, which is the old Pilgrim Hospital. I don't have any first-hand experience of hotels along the Camino, but I did love that part in the movie The Way when the characters had a night of luxury in this Parador hotel in Leon. But it was also very funny when they got lonely in their separate rooms instead of being in a communal space, so they all ended up in the same room. Anyway, I digress. Should I book ahead? This is, of course, a personal choice, and there are a lot of opinions out there about what you should do. My opinion is, do what works for you. I did book the first 3 nights before I even started the Camino, and there were a couple of reasons for that. In my first week, I was walking with my family, and we wanted to ensure that we had somewhere to stay without having to worry about it. It meant we could just enjoy our hike. The second reason is that accommodation at the beginning of the trail can get quite booked up, especially if you're there at a busy time of year and if you wanted to stay in a particular place that's very popular. One of those was Border, which is an albergue in the Pyrenees, and it's often booked really, really early. We booked in January for an August stay. However, booking ahead in general can affect how spontaneous you can be. If you have an injury or you're really tired, you may want to walk fewer kilometres than you planned. Alternatively, you may make some friends that you want to stay with, and if your accommodation is all sorted in advance, it would make it much more difficult to spend the evening with your friends if they're staying somewhere else. I met people who had booked every single night of their whole Camino, and this worked for them. But when someone in the group was injured or became unwell, that person then had no option to stay a second night. They had to take a bus or a taxi to their next lot of accommodation. But they did have peace of mind knowing that their accommodation was all sorted for them. Municipal albergues and donativos won't let you book ahead, so having places to stay in popular locations which don't allow you to book ahead makes it possible to be spontaneous on the Camino. It means you can decide when you want to stop walking. Some nights I did just turn up at albergues and always managed to get a bed. To make this easier, you may also wish to consider staying off one of the guidebook stages in a village in between. But mostly what I did was to start walking each day with a general goal in mind of how far I wanted to walk. Around mid-morning, I would start calling or texting ahead to book somewhere. I also did use Booking.com, but bear in mind if Booking.com says there is no availability somewhere, that might not be the actual case. It's always worth calling the accommodation as they don't often put all of their beds on there. And I think they prefer you to book directly with them anyway, so they're not actually having to pay a third party. So to recap, if you want peace of mind with having your accommodation all sorted ahead of time, that is an option. If you want a mix of booking some special places that appeal to you at various locations, but also want an element of spontaneity, that is also an option. And if you want to do everything on the fly, you can do this too. So at the end, it's your Camino. Okay, next up, if I do want to book ahead, should I use a travel company to book things for me or should I do it myself? So this is something that I actually don't have any experience of, so I will keep this section short. But I would say that if you really want peace of mind and you want everything sorted for you in advance, and have a contact number if things don't go to plan, knowing that there's someone at the end of the phone that can help sort things out for you, you can, of course, book through a travel company. And this option will, of course, be more expensive because you're paying someone to do the research and to do the admin for you. This may totally appeal to you or it may not appeal to you at all. Again, it's your Camino and you need to do what's right for you. Bag transfer companies. I have noticed on Facebook groups and other forums that there can be really strong opinions about this from a minority of people. I didn't actually witness any of these opinions on the Camino itself though. I knew people that were using this service and it worked really well for them. However, in order to transfer your bag, you need somewhere to transport it to, and that means that you need to have sorted out where you're going to be staying at least one night in advance. There are also some albergues that won't accept bag transfers, such as municipal albergues. What I do want to say though is that bag transfer companies are dependent on pilgrims for their income. Additionally, you never know why somebody is having their bag transferred. Having your bag transferred can be so enabling and mean that a multi-day pilgrimage or hike becomes a possibility for you. If you've got a health problem, a disability, an injury, you're unwell, or you just don't feel physically strong enough to manage your bag, then transporting it can enable you to do the Camino. And that is an incredible thing. There are people of all ages and there are people who have endured all kinds of health problems who are taking on this pilgrimage of a lifetime, and the ability to transport their bag means that their dream can come true. So there are envelopes at most private albergues and hotels and hostels from a selection of the luggage transfer companies, and all you do is put your money in the envelope, your next address onto it and attach it to your bag, and voila, your bag will be at your next lot of accommodation when you arrive. Oh, you do need to text the company as well to let them know to pick up your bag. So if you have an injury along the way, or if you're having back pain, or you just want a day without your backpack, then you can do that. That's no problem. Okay, I'm now going to mention a few of my accommodation highlights along the Camino Frances. The first was Border in the Pyrenees. It's an incredible place to stay. We were above the clouds and we had spectacular views. The food was incredible and it was the place where I met my Camino family. So one lady that I met on the first night at Border, 40 days later, we spent evening watching the sunset together at Finisterre. So not only is it a special place, but it's right at the start of the pilgrimage, and it's a place where you can really get to know people at the beginning. The next place that I want to mention is Casa Suzea in Zubiri. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary house, but it is actually a true pilgrim home for up to 12 pilgrims. And it has a dorm, it has private rooms, and it has a garden, which is a lovely place for pilgrims to hang out, as well as a communal living space inside. The Hospitalero cooks the most amazing multi-course meal, and you all sit down together and have dinner. It was just really lovely. The next place I want to mention is a Donativo albergue that we stayed in Zabaldika just before Pamplona. You had to take an alternate route off the Camino to get there, but it was a really special place that was run by volunteer hospitaleros, and it was supported by the nuns in the convent next door. They came in and they invited us into the church where we were allowed to ring the oldest bell in Navarra. And then later on, they invited us back into the church where we went into this little room and had candles lit, and we had this special circle time together where the pilgrims all shared why they were walking the Camino, and then we sang some songs together. And that was all done in multiple different languages. It was really lovely. Another favourite albergue along the Camino was in a town called Hontanes in the Meseta. In this privately run albergue called Santa Brigida Hostel No. 1 had a huge modern dormitory as well as private rooms. They cooked a huge paella for the pilgrims and we had communal dinner together, which was great. But I have to say that the highlight of this place was the hydrotherapy spa, which was well worth every penny of the €20 admission fee. There was a pool, jets to soothe aching muscles, a sauna, a steam room, and an ice bucket. And along the Camino, there are so many amazing places, but I will mention two more. The Albergue de la Santa Cruz at I can never say it right, Sahun, which was in a monastery. The brothers who run the albergue were so welcoming, and for about €20, I actually had my own monk cell with an ensuite bathroom. Another welcoming site in the Meseta was an albergue where I again booked a private room. I didn't only stay in private rooms, I am highlighting some of these though. And this room actually seemed more like a hotel room to me. There was really good self-service laundry facilities too, and a lovely garden, a bar, and again, dinner with fellow pilgrims. Do you have a favourite place to stay on any of the Camino routes? Please do share them in the comments below. And if you want to know what to bring with you on your Camino, watch this video.